Have you ever read a story where the characters felt like they were just floating around in a vacuum, not really connecting or impacting each other in meaningful ways? It's a common problem, and it can really drain the life and emotion out of a story. But fear not. Today, we're going to talk about how you can avoid that pitfall by crafting rich, dynamic, utterly captivating relationships between your characters. In this video, we'll explore why character relationships are so crucial to creating a story world that feels authentic and alive. We'll break down the different types of relationship dynamics you can play with, and I'll give you some practical tips for depicting those relationships through dialogue and action in a way that will have readers hanging on every word. By the end of this tutorial, you'll be ready to weave a complex web of character connections that will take your fiction to a whole new level. First off, let's talk about why character relationships matter so much in the first place. Imagine your favorite fictional world. Maybe it's the sprawling fantasy realm of Lord of the Rings or the quirky small town of Stars Hollow in Gilmore Girls. Chances are, a big part of what makes those worlds feel so rich and immersive is the intricate network of relationships between the characters. It's not just a bunch of isolated individuals running around. It's a living ecosystem where everyone is connected and influencing each other in fascinating ways. That's the power of thoughtful character relationships. They make your story world feel authentic, textured, and emotionally resonant. When done well, fictional relationships have this incredible way of mirroring and illuminating the bonds we cherish or lament in our own lives. We see our own friendships, rivalries, and romances reflected back to us, and it draws us even deeper into the story. So, how do you go about creating character relationships that strike that chord? One key is to embrace variety. Don't just settle for a world where everyone is either best buds or bitter enemies. In real life, we navigate all kinds of relationship dynamics, and your fiction should reflect that beautiful, messy complexity. A masterclass in relationship variety is the Harry Potter series. J.K. Rowling gives us the central friendship trio of Harry, Ron, and Hermione, that classic chosen family dynamic that so many of us cherish in our own lives. But she doesn't stop there. She also explores mentor relationships, like the one between Harry and Dumbledore, where wisdom is passed down and tested from generation to generation. There are sibling bonds full of love and rivalry, like between Ron and Ginny. There are antagonistic duos, like Harry and Draco, who push each other's buttons and force each other to confront their flaws and blind spots. And of course, there are romances of all flavors, from the slow burn, will they, won't they of Ron and Hermione, to the tragic first love of Snape and Lily. By weaving together all those different threads, Rowling creates a fictional tapestry that feels just as rich and varied as the relationships in our own lives. And that's what you want to strive for in your own writing. Challenge yourself to include familial bonds, friendships, romances, rivalries, uneasy alliances, and any other dynamics that will add tension and texture to your story. Of course, it's not enough to just have those relationships exist. You also need to depict them in a way that feels authentic and engaging. And that brings us to our next point: the importance of revealing relationships through dialogue and action. You knew I was going to beat the show don't tell drum here, didn't you? But it's especially crucial when it comes to character dynamics. One of my all-time favorite examples of this is the way Jane Austen depicts the romance between Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice. We don't get long paragraphs explaining the nuances of their feelings for each other. Instead, we see it all play out in their interactions, in the way they banter and bicker, in the loaded glances and brushing fingertips, in the things they say and don't say to each other. There's this fantastic scene where they're dancing at a ball, and the dialogue just crackles with tension and subtext. In Austen's hands, A simple conversation about the size of the room becomes this barbed, simmering battleground of attraction and disdain. Every word feels weighted with meaning. That's the kind of subtlety and dynamism you want to bring to your own character interactions. Really zoom in on how characters speak to each other, the power dynamics and emotional undercurrents in every exchange. Do they interrupt each other or leave long, awkward pauses? Is there warmth and ease in their banter, or stiff formality barely concealing old wounds? Do they make a lot of eye contact or avoid each other's gazes? Even the smallest details of body language and word choice can speak volumes about the history and complexity of a relationship. One exercise I love to do when I'm crafting character relationships is to write out fictional text message exchanges between them. It forces me to really focus on their individual voices and communication styles, and often reveals all sorts of fun nuances about how their dynamic plays out when no one else is watching. Give it a try and see what intimacies and tensions come spilling out onto the screen. Of course, the real key to making character relationships compelling is to mine them for juicy, page-turning conflict. I'm not saying every story needs to be a soap opera, but let's be real. The most fascinating dynamics are often the ones with a bit of grit and strain to them. Just look at a classic like Hamlet. Shakespeare takes the seemingly unshakable bonds of family and proceeds to detonate them with secrets, betrayals, and moral failings. Hamlet's disgust over his mother marrying his uncle so soon after his father's death, his anguish over his father's ghost crying out for vengeance, his conflicted feelings for Ophelia as he spirals into despair and madness. It's all just one big pressure cooker of fractured relationships, and it makes for intensity and emotional stakes. That's the kind of narrative gold you can spin out of fraught character bonds. So don't be afraid to put cracks and complications into your characters' relationships. Maybe the central romance is threatened by a misunderstanding or a temptation. Maybe a long-buried family secret comes to light and changes how siblings see each other. Maybe a friendship is strained by conflicting loyalties or moral disagreements. The more you can use relationships to generate tension, raise stakes, and force characters to confront their own flaws and fears, the more riveting your story will become. At the end of the day, that's what great character relationships boil down to: creating a story world that feels authentic, complex, and bursting with emotional resonance. When you take the time to develop a varied ecosystem of character dynamics, depict them with nuance through dialogue and behavior, and use them to fuel conflict and growth, you'll immerse readers in a fictional landscape as textured as real life. We'll care about your characters not just as isolated protagonists and villains, but as partners, rivals, friends, lovers, and family. And that glorious, tangled web of relationships will have us turning pages long into the night, desperate to see how it all turns out. So here's your homework, writers. Take a long, hard look at the connections between your characters. Are they diverse and specific? Are they depicted with nuance through interactions and subtext? Are they generating the kind of tension and emotional stakes that make for a crackling good story? Don't be afraid to really interrogate your character dynamics and see how you can deepen, complicate, and intensify them. Your readers and your characters will thank you for it. If you want a deeper dive into the art of crafting complex character relationships, I've got a bunch of resources and exercises linked in the description below. And if you want to support this channel and take your writing skills to the next level, definitely check out my online course all about the nuts and bolts of character development, dialogue, pacing, and more. I pour my heart into making it the most helpful and engaging experience possible. For now, though, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What are some of your favorite fictional relationships, and why do they work so well? What are your go-to tips for crafting fascinating, emotionally rich character dynamics?